What happens when one of Britain's most beloved actors sits down for what should be a friendly chat and finds himself blindsided by a host who seems determined to tear him down? In just 42 seconds, a simple question about his career would ignite a firestorm that left the entire studio in shocked silence. The morning started like any other on the show. David Jason, the legendary actor known for his warmth and humble nature, walked onto the set with his characteristic smile. The studio audience applauded as he took his seat on the bright orange sofa. Sitting across from him was Lorraine Kelly, flanked by two panel members, journalist Angela Morrison and lifestyle expert Thomas Webb. The lights were bright, the cameras were rolling, and everything seemed perfectly normal. Lorraine leaned forward with what appeared to be a welcoming smile. "David, lovely to have you here. Now, I have to ask, you've been acting for what, nearly 60 years now?" David nodded graciously. "Yes, it's been quite a journey. I feel very fortunate to have had such a long career doing what I love." "Fortunate indeed," Lorraine said, but there was something in her tone that made the studio audience shift uncomfortably. "Though I suppose when you play the same types of characters over and over, it must get rather easy, doesn't it?" The smile on David's face faltered slightly. Angela Morrison's eyebrows raised, and she glanced at Thomas Webb, who looked equally surprised by the comment. "I wouldn't say easy," David replied carefully. "Each role has its own challenges and nuances. I try to bring something unique to every character I portray." Lorraine waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, come now, David. Del Boy, Frost, they're all just you in different costumes, aren't they? I mean, let's be honest about it." Thomas Webb shifted in his seat and attempted to intervene. "Lorraine, I think that's a bit unfair. David has shown tremendous range throughout his career." But Lorraine cut him off sharply. "Thomas, I'm conducting this interview. If I want your opinion, I'll ask for it." The atmosphere in the studio had completely changed. What was supposed to be a light-hearted conversation had taken a hostile turn. David sat up straighter, his expression now guarded. "I take great pride in my work," David said, his voice steady but firm. "Every role I've taken on has required dedication and craft." "Craft," Lorraine repeated, almost mockingly. "That's an interesting word choice. Tell me, David, do you think perhaps you've been coasting on the success of Only Fools and Horses for the past few decades? Living off the glory days?" Angela Morrison gasped audibly. "Lorraine, that's completely out of line." "Excuse me?" Lorraine turned to Angela with ice in her voice. "This is my show, Angela. I can ask whatever questions I deem appropriate." David remained composed, though his jaw was tight. "I've continued to work consistently because I love acting, not because I'm coasting on anything. I've taken on new challenges, worked with wonderful directors and actors, and always strived to give my best." "Your best," Lorraine said, leaning back in her chair with her arms crossed. "And yet, you're not exactly winning BAFTAs left and right anymore, are you? When was the last time you did something truly relevant?" The audience was now completely silent, the tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. Thomas Webb looked appalled, shaking his head in disbelief. "Lorraine, this is unacceptable," Thomas said. "David came here as a guest, and you're treating him with such disrespect." "Oh, am I?" Lorraine snapped. "Or am I just asking the questions that everyone else is too polite to ask? Perhaps Mr. Jason here needs to hear some hard truths." David's eyes narrowed. "What exactly are you trying to achieve here, Lorraine? If you had concerns about my career, or wanted to have a serious discussion, there are ways to do that without being deliberately cruel." "Cruel," Lorraine laughed, but it was a cold, harsh sound. "Darling, this isn't cruel. This is reality. You're a relic, David. A lovely relic, sure, but the industry has moved on. Maybe it's time you accepted that." Angela stood up from her seat, her face flushed with anger. "I will not sit here and watch you bully a guest like this. David is a national treasure, and he deserves respect." "Sit down, Angela," Lorraine commanded. This is my show, and I'll run it how I see fit. If you don't like it, you know where the door is. David held up a hand, trying to calm the situation. It's all right, Angela. I can handle this. He turned back to Lorraine. I'm not sure what's happened here today, or why you've decided to take this approach, but I came here in good faith to have a conversation. Good faith, Lorraine scoffed. You came here to promote whatever little project you're working on, to remind people you still exist. Let's not pretend this is anything more than that. Actually, David said, his voice rising slightly, I came here because your producers reached out to me. Multiple times. They were very enthusiastic about having me on the show. So if anyone was eager for this interview, it was your team, not me. This seemed to strike a nerve with Lorraine. Her face reddened, and she sat forward aggressively. My team may have invited you, but that doesn't mean I have to sit here and fawn all over you like you're some sort of deity. You're an actor, David. An old actor who had a few good roles decades ago. Thomas Webb stood up now, too, joining Angela. Lorraine, you need to stop this right now. This has gone way beyond professional behavior. Both of you, sit down, Lorraine shouted. This is my show. Mine. I decide what happens here. The studio audience was shifting uncomfortably, some people whispering to each other, others looking genuinely distressed by what they were witnessing. The camera operators kept filming, though one of them looked like he wanted to stop. David remained seated, but his posture was rigid. I've been in this industry for a very long time, and I've dealt with difficult interviewers before. But I have to say, Lorraine, this is something else entirely. What you're doing right now isn't journalism. It isn't entertainment. It's just mean-spirited. Oh, please, Lorraine rolled her eyes dramatically. Don't play the victim, David. You can't handle a little criticism? After all these years in the spotlight? How pathetic. Criticism is one thing, David said, his voice now carrying real edge. What you're doing is something completely different. You're attempting to humiliate me on national television for reasons I cannot fathom. Lorraine stood up from her chair, pointing a finger at David. You want to know the reason? The reason is that I'm tired of this industry treating people like you as if you're untouchable. You're not special, David. You're just a man who got lucky with a few roles. Angela stepped between them. Lorraine, you need to apologize right now. This has crossed every line imaginable. I will do no such thing, Lorraine shot back. Get out of my way, Angela. David slowly rose from his seat, his face a mixture of disappointment and controlled anger. I think it's quite clear that this interview is over. Oh, no you don't, Lorraine said sharply. You don't get to just walk off my show. I didn't dismiss you. You don't dismiss me, David said quietly, but with steel in his voice. I'm not your employee, Lorraine. I'm a guest, and I have every right to leave when I'm being treated abusively. Abusively? Lorraine's voice reached a shrill pitch. You want to talk about abuse? What about the abuse viewers suffer through watching your tired old performances year after year? What about that? The audience gasped collectively. Several people in the front row looked genuinely shocked, their mouths hanging open. One elderly woman in the third row had her hand over her heart. Thomas Webb moved to stand beside David. Come on, David. You don't have to put up with this. Let's get you out of here. Don't you dare, Lorraine pointed at Thomas. You're fired, Thomas. You hear me? Fired. You can't fire me mid-show, Thomas said incredulously. And even if you could, I'd rather be fired than sit here and watch this disgraceful display. David unclipped his microphone slowly and deliberately, setting it down on the coffee table in front of him. I've always believed in treating people with kindness and respect, regardless of who they are or what they do. It's a shame you don't share that philosophy, Lorraine. Don't you dare take the moral high ground with me, Lorraine seethed. You come onto my show, and you think you can just walk out. Who do you think you are? I'm someone who knows when a situation has become untenable, David replied calmly. And this situation became untenable the moment you decided to use this platform to attack rather than converse. Angela had also removed her microphone. I'm leaving too. I won't be part of this circus. Lorraine looked around wildly, her face now bright red with rage. Fine. All of you. Go. Leave. See if I care. This is my show, and it will go on without any of you. A show needs guests, Lorraine, David said quietly. And after today, I imagine you'll find it quite difficult to book anyone willing to sit in that chair. Are you threatening me? Lorraine demanded. Not at all, David said, his tone almost sad now. I'm simply observing that word travels fast in this industry. People talk. And what happened here today will be talked about extensively, I'm sure. One of the producers rushed onto the set, a young woman with a clipboard who looked absolutely panicked. Lorraine, perhaps we should take a break. Regroup. No! Lorraine shouted at her. We're live. We keep going. With respect, Lorraine, the producer said nervously, we've lost our guest and 2 panel members. There's nothing to keep going with. David had started walking toward the exit, flanked by Thomas and Angela. The camera followed them, capturing every moment of the exodus. Lorraine called after them, her voice desperate now, rather than angry. David! David, come back here. We're not finished. David paused at the edge of the set and turned back. For a moment, the legendary actor's famous warmth returned to his face, but it was tinged with sadness. Actually, Lorraine, we are finished. Quite finished indeed. You'll regret this, Lorraine shouted. Walking off my show like this. It'll damage your reputation. Thomas Webb turned back as well. The only reputation damage today is yours, Lorraine, and you did that all by yourself. The 3 of them continued walking, their footsteps echoing in the now deathly quiet studio. The audience sat frozen, unsure what to do or how to react. Some were filming on their phones, despite the signs asking them not to. Others just stared in disbelief. Lorraine stood alone on the set, breathing heavily, looking around at the empty seats where her guest and panel had been moments before. The producer approached her cautiously. Lorraine, we need to cut to commercial, the producer said softly. No, Lorraine said, though her voice had lost its earlier venom. No, we can salvage this. Bring out the next segment. There is no next segment, the producer said gently. The rest of the show was built around David being here. Lorraine's face crumpled for just a second before she caught herself, straightening her shoulders and lifting her chin. Then I'll do it myself. I don't need them. I don't need any of them. She turned to face the camera, plastering on a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it seems our guest was a bit too sensitive for honest conversation. But that's quite all right. We have plenty more to discuss today. But the audience wasn't having it. Someone in the back started clapping slowly, sarcastically. Others joined in, the applause building, but clearly mocking, rather than supportive. A few people stood up and walked out themselves, shaking their heads. Lorraine's smile became more strained. Now, there's no need for that. Let's all just calm down and... Cut! Someone shouted from off camera. Lorraine, we're cutting. This is over. You can't cut my show, Lorraine protested, but her voice cracked slightly. Behind the scenes, David Jason was being ushered into a private room by the show's staff, all of whom were apologizing profusely. Thomas and Angela were with him, both still looking shell-shocked by what had just transpired. Are you all right, David? Angela asked, touching his arm gently. David took a deep breath and nodded. I'm fine. Shaken, certainly, but fine. I've never experienced anything quite like that in all my years in television. No one has, Thomas said firmly. That was absolutely unprecedented. Lorraine's behavior was inexcusable. A senior producer entered the room, a man in his 50s who looked absolutely mortified. Mr. Jason, I cannot begin to express how sorry I am. That should never have happened. We had no idea Lorraine was planning to do what she did. I appreciate that, David said graciously. I know this wasn't orchestrated by your team. We've immediately ended the broadcast, the producer continued. We're going to issue a statement, and I want you to know that we fully support you in this situation. David held up a hand. I don't need statements or support, thank you. I just want to leave and put this behind me. Back on the set, Lorraine was being confronted by multiple producers and network executives who had rushed to the studio. Her earlier bravado had completely evaporated, replaced by defensive justifications. I was just trying to have an honest conversation, she was saying. Why is everyone acting like I committed a crime? Lorraine, one of the executives said sternly, you verbally attacked a beloved public figure on live television. You created a hostile environment that drove away your guest and 2 panel members. This is a disaster. He was being difficult, Lorraine insisted, but even she didn't sound convinced. Meanwhile, in the green room, David was preparing to leave. Staff members were still apologizing, offering him water, asking if he needed anything. He politely declined everything, just wanting to exit with as much dignity as the situation would allow. You handled that with remarkable grace, Angela told him as they walked toward the back exit. I don't know how you stayed so calm. Years of practice, David said with a slight smile. Though I must admit, my heart was racing the entire time. You would never have known it, Thomas said admiringly. You were the picture of composure while she was having whatever that was. They reached the exit where a car was waiting for David. He turned to shake hands with Angela and Thomas. Thank you both for standing up for me in there, he said warmly. You didn't have to do that. Of course we did, Angela said firmly. What she was doing was wrong, and someone needed to say it. I hope this doesn't cause problems for your careers, David said with genuine concern. Thomas laughed. After what just happened, I think we'll be fine. It's Lorraine who should be worried about her career. David climbed into the car, and as it pulled away from the studio, he looked back at the building one last time. Inside his pocket, his phone was already buzzing with messages from friends, family, and colleagues who had been watching live. The incident was already spreading across social media, with clips being shared thousands of times. But David wasn't thinking about any of that. He was thinking about how strange it was that a simple morning chat show appearance had turned into such a spectacle. He was thinking about Lorraine's face when he'd stood up to leave, the mixture of rage and something else, something that looked almost like panic. Back in the studio, Lorraine sat alone in her dressing room, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The makeup that had looked perfect an hour ago now seemed garish under the harsh lights. She could hear muffled voices outside, producers and executives discussing what to do next, how to handle the fallout. Her phone sat on the table in front of her, screen dark. She knew that if she turned it on, she'd be flooded with notifications, messages, tweets. She knew what they would say. She'd seen it happen to others who'd had public meltdowns, who'd crossed lines they shouldn't have crossed. There was a knock on the door. Lorraine, we need to talk about next steps. She didn't answer. She just kept staring at her reflection, wondering how she'd let things spiral so completely out of control. The interview had started normally. Enough. But then something had taken over. Some need to provoke, to push, to dominate the conversation in a way that had nothing to do with good television and everything to do with her own issues. David, meanwhile, had arrived home. He made himself a cup of tea and sat in his favorite chair, the one by the window that looked out onto his garden. The phone calls and messages kept coming, but he ignored them for now. He'd deal with all of that later. Right now, he just wanted to sit quietly and process what had happened. He thought about Lorraine's words, the accusations she'd thrown at him. Some part of him wanted to be angry, to rage about the injustice of it all. But mostly, he just felt sad. Sad that someone could be so consumed by whatever demons drove them that they'd lash out at a stranger on live television. Sad that the simple joy of conversation had been poisoned by ego and hostility. Sad that an entire studio full of people had been made uncomfortable by one person's inability to show basic human decency. His wife came into the room, having heard about the incident from a friend who'd been watching. "Are you all right, love?" "I'm fine," David said, and he meant it. Just a bit bewildered by the whole thing. "What on earth was she thinking?" his wife asked, sitting down beside him. "I honestly don't know," David replied, "and I'm not sure she knows either." The afternoon sun streamed through the window, warming the room. Outside, birds chirped in the garden, completely oblivious to the drama that had unfolded that morning. David took a sip of his tea and allowed himself a small smile. He'd been in the entertainment industry long enough to know that this too would pass. There would be other interviews, other shows, other moments. This one incident, as unpleasant as it had been, didn't define him or his career. He'd walked away with his dignity intact, and that was what mattered. In her dressing room, Lorraine finally picked up her phone. The screen lit up with hundreds of notifications. She scrolled through them, her face growing paler with each passing second. The reaction was even worse than she'd feared. Colleagues were distancing themselves, viewers were outraged, and industry insiders were already speculating about the future of her show. She put the phone down again, face down this time, so she wouldn't have to see the screen. There was another knock at the door, more insistent this time. "Lorraine, we really need to talk. Now." She stood up, smoothed her skirt, and took a deep breath. Whatever came next, she'd have to face it. But as she reached for the door handle, she couldn't help but think about David's parting words. "We are finished. Quite finished indeed." And somewhere deep down, beneath all the denial and defensiveness, she knew he was right.